Me, a bro.
Yep.
He, a dude.
That's good stuff. All right. Let's try it. Okay. Welcome to the We Will Journey podcast. We're talking about faith and life as it happens, and not the glossy exterior we wish it was.
Oh.
What, man? What did I do wrong?
I think you said it's because all the things I was thinking about before. But we can edit that. You got that part good.
Oh.
You got it good. Okay.
Okay. All right.
Okay, just...
Now it's your turn.
Good?
Yeah.
Wait. We're going to get under the surface. I should have said all those things before. We should have waited down and dirty until after we read this part.
Okay.
Okay. Wait. We get under the surface and explore the down and dirty. Okay. Maybe we should. It doesn't have to be word for word, right?
No. I mean, I gave an interpretation.
Okay. All right. We get under the surface and explore the down and dirty of life as it pertains to our beliefs, our relationships, politics, and absolutely everything else.
Oh, there we go. That was good. All right. Are you digging our theme music? Well, we dig it too. You can check out more Jane Gillman music at her website, janegillman.com, or you can download some of her music to your playlist on iTunes. That's Gillman.
3, 2, 1.
I never noticed that. You have a plant, and then next to your plant on the wall, you have a picture of a plant. I mean, a painting of a plant, right?
A painting? Yes, that is true. There is some, like, leafy... Yep, so there's the plant. And there is... Yeah, a painting of kind of like some leafy foliage. I don't know if that came...
Foliage, yeah. That's
foliage.
Right. That's the theme of your room. Foliage.
Yeah. It's actually a green wall, and there's more plant-based stuff above the wood stove. So,
and you've gone, in fact, gone totally vegan, right? That's why you have that theme? Because you just eat plant burgers and all that?
Plant burgers, yes, we add seasoning, herbs, to all of the non-plant-based food material that we eat. So we do consume some muscle tissue of other animals. So yeah,
I'm vegan too. I'll use donuts for every meal. It's the only thing I can find that I like.
Yeah.
Just kidding. I have a balanced diet.
We have friends that we have a number of friends actually that seem to fluctuate. These days it is difficult to cook for friends because of allergies, different diets. So if somebody's like on a keto diet or maybe they are vegetarian or vegan. So cooking is actually, if you have a group of people that you want to cook for, it's actually fairly challenging, to find something that will work with everybody.
That's why I like cooking for young people, because either they don't seem to, not everyone, but it seems like a lot of times I cook for like the youth group, either they don't have some of those things or they don't share it. And then you find out later, like, my stomach's killing me. Like, what happened? Like, oh, I'm gluten intolerant. I just didn't want to tell you.
I can't have milk. So, but I love milkshakes. So tasty.
Yes, we have.
So tasty. Please take me to the emergency room now.
So you had something you were going to expand on when we actually started this conversation.
Yeah, we were talking. I listened to a Holy Post podcast yesterday, and they were having technical difficulties. So by the time they actually started recording, like us, they had a fairly lengthy conversation. And so we were trying to decide what to talk about today, Seth. We've discussed all kinds of ideas, and but one of them, and you and I, we've heard many, many sermons, right? I mean, we've heard preachers preach all over, many different pastors, all different topics. And my guess is, if you're like me, you probably don't have that many that you really, have that stand out, that you can recall. Certainly the entirety of the message. There's definitely little bits and pieces, maybe.
Right.
But out of all the thousands of sermons that we've heard, I'm guessing maybe on one hand we can maybe remember about that many of those,
it's more moments. It's more moments from sermons. Yeah.
Yeah, just some small moments and very few probably. But anyways, we were talking about your brother a little bit. It kind of tied into another conversation we were having. And it made me think of when he was out of college and doing youth ministry. And he was paired with a senior pastor, and they could not have been more opposite, right? They were just totally different people. Mm-hmm. Which made for a very interesting dynamic there for your brother. And the guy, he was a different kind of dude, the let's just say that he was a different kind of dude. Really smart. He was very intellectual. But out of all the people one of the things that I remember most about a sermon is actually a sermon that he gave. And I guess, what's just interesting to me is he's probably one of the most unlikely people in my mind. I've listened to famous pastors and just really eloquent speakers and all these people and he's none of that, right? He's not that. But he said something that I just found really, really profound. And I think about it on a regular basis. And it really pertained to your brother at that time in my life. Because I was in, he and I were really good friends and spent a lot of time together. But like your brother and that senior pastor, they were very different. Myself and your brother, we were also very different, and so, we've talked about different things, but I was at that point in time, I worked for an insurance agency in that town, and so, like business meals, those kind of things, that was kind of a regular part of my life. The first time your brother and I went out for like dinner at a nicer restaurant in that town, he ordered a T-bone steak.
As he would, yes.
Yeah. And I think I maybe got like chicken fried steak, which would have been usual for me. And so we get our food, and I start cutting up my chicken fried steak. And I look up at your brother, and he actually has just picked up his T-bone steak, and he is just taking bites out of it, And I'm like, dude, what are you doing, And he's like, what? It has a bone. Like it's a chicken wing handle, or something, man. Yeah. And So I'm like, dude, you can't do that. Put that steak down. Get your fork and knife, man. So, we had all of these things, right? All of these things. We were just so different, and our experiences had been different. We obviously had a lot of commonality too. But I found myself always kind of critiquing, your brother and these little etiquette type things. I would find myself critiquing him. And so the senior pastor at his church, we were sitting down listening to a message one Sunday, and he said, when you've truly accepted another person, you will no longer try to change them. And at that point in time, your brother and I had journeyed together for some time. We'd become very good friends and spent a lot of time together. And I thought, holy cow, I think I've accepted your brother. So in my mind, I think I've accepted him because I don't think I try to change him anymore. I just accept him for who he is, and maybe I'd done enough changing by that point in time that I felt comfortable with him. But
he had changed you. He had changed you beyond repair.
Yeah. We probably had changed each other though, and that's how a good relationship works. We build up each other and sometimes encourage each other in certain areas to maybe make modifications. But I think about that all the time. When I've accepted somebody, I no longer try to change that person. I've just accepted them for who they are, for their flaws, for their things that make them, wonderful. So it's just one of those moments that just stand out very vividly to me, and kind of from an unexpected source. It was just very insightful. And so, anyways, do you have anything like that, Seth, that just stands out to you and you're like, man, I think about what, and maybe you can blow it up and it doesn't have to be like in the context of a sermon, but just something that somebody said that, just has been profound for
well, it's interesting because, I had a very, very similar thing that my dad told me once about marriage, and it was very similar along those lines where he and my mom are very different as well, and my wife and I are different in a lot of ways. And he basically said, like how marriage works is you get to a point where you realize like those things that bother me, I'm just going to live with them. They're not actually a big deal. I'm just going to accept this person. That's how they are. And then there's like this, like a sense of peace kind of that happens in your mind where instead of, for example, my wife goes into the kitchen and sees that I left my wallet on the counter or something. I don't know. I'm trying to think of some stupid example. And she's like, "Oh, Seth, you left your wallet there again," and get like annoyed about it, and then like we're frustrated with each other over a stupid thing. Then that would kind of make a tension in our relationship for that day. But maybe after years of me doing that, which I don't actually do, I was trying to think of actual good example, but there's things like that I do, stupid things, and eventually, if she's able to come to a point, and for me the same on the opposite side, come to a point where you're like, oh, I'll just pick that up and I'll put it where it belongs. Then there's just like a sense of like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. That's how this person is. That's how they think. For example, for me, like, I'm often really hard to like motivate to do something until it's like ticking down, to the last moment where it's like, oh, this actually has to happen. And so obviously that can cause frustration for my wife, where she's like, hey, we got to go in a half an hour. And I'm like, oh, a half an hour. Perfect. That's like forever. And then it's like 2 minutes and then I haven't got anything ready and I'm sitting in my underwear eating ice cream,
as
I do most days.
So the wallet thing, that doesn't actually happen, but sitting in your underwear eating ice cream, that happens on a regular basis, is what you're saying?
I wouldn't actually say regular basis. I was trying to exaggerate, but that does happen. Not necessarily. That's not necessarily the thing. Cream. She always makes the joke that I'm like, we got to go to church in 2 minutes, and I'm jumping in the shower. You know, that's the one. And anything. Anyways, those are things that like she would have the right. Basically, like that is really annoying of me to do those kind of things. To like, we're needing to get going, and I'm trying to like do this last minute thing. But she's kind of learned. Okay, this is kind of how Seth is. These are the things I can do to kind of help him, and that's what I'm gonna do. And that's so I guess my experience with that, which is very similar to that pastor who you said, you know, that's kind of advice my dad gave me, and that's really beautiful. I think whether it's in your marriage relationship or friendship. It goes back to the topic of like your lens, right? And how you view people. And you can choose every interaction you have, whether it's someone close to you or not, you can choose to view that person through a lens of, oh my gosh, they did this thing again. It's super annoying. It must be because they don't care about me. Or it can be like, okay, I'm sure there's a reason why this person did that. And I love them anyways.
Yeah.
And we're moving forward. Kind of thing. That's, I guess, what came to my mind as you were sharing your story.
Right. Yeah. Well, you know, early on in any relationship, you know, that can be a real struggle, especially marriage. Natalie and I, we had a big fight on our honeymoon. It was the last day of the honeymoon. We were trying to get back to the airport. We were in San Francisco, and I was trying to get from like the third lane over to the left in totally packed traffic to my exit, which was, you know, just right there, and was unsuccessful in doing so. And so she's yelling at me to get over. And I'm like, you know, look at the traffic. Obviously, I can't get over. And, you know, she just kept yelling at me to get over. And I'm yelling at her, telling her that I can't get over. Classic. And basically, I said something in the form of shut up at some point in time. And so on the way home, our flight home, we never actually talked to each other. On the way, we were pretty angry with each other, you know, after that moment, and we eventually made up, and so that was a fight on our honeymoon. We had another significant fight early on. As we were remodeling a house. So one of the things they say never to do, you know, when you first get married, sorry, I've changed my position there, but
remodel a house, get a puppy,
is remodel a house.
Get a puppy.
Yeah, never remodel a house. And so we jumped right into remodeling a house. And I had a way that I did, you know, the certain task, which we were pulling old rusty nails out of the framework of the house. Natalie had another method, and I criticized her method of making little piles of nails all over the house. And I'm like, why don't you just throw them away as you know, instead of having to go back and pick up all these piles. And so that escalated into a significant fight. So, you know, like, there's all these little situations that come up, and they're very small and minute, but they become big for whatever reason. And you know,
my favorite.
Typically, I think. I think probably those little fights stem from maybe some bigger issues that are going on that, you've kind of swept under the rug and haven't wanted to talk about for one reason or another. And then they come out in those little seemingly insignificant moments. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, the nice thing about those times is sometimes there's a moment where like you realize it in the moment still, which is rare, I admit, but we realize in the moment, like, this is ridiculous. And then you can kind of like laugh about it. Like in that time, be like, I'm sorry, honey. Like, I'm sorry that I just flipped out about this stupid thing. What are we doing? And then, and so that's like, I guess that's the silver lining in some of those things where you actually get to experience that moment of like, how ridiculous is that? And what I've experienced too, is, I think another thing we talked about before is just like, or you mentioned earlier, is the spiritual world. And we often like to just see flesh and blood and material things, and we forget that it's a very real spiritual world going on, and we're not fighting against flesh and blood, but about the spiritual powers. And I've experienced a few times where I've just had this sense, all of a sudden I'm getting annoyed at my wife about little stupid things, right? Like that. And then I think like there's something going on. Like there's like a heaviness. And then sometimes I'll just pray and like any kind of spiritual power that is not of God and like command in the name of Jesus to leave me alone. And then it'll just be like light. Like I'll just feel like a burden gone. And I'll be like, okay, there was something going on. And sometimes I don't even come to that point. I don't even ever think about it. But when like those little, especially like those little things, a lot of times when I notice I'm getting kind of irked about stupid little things. Yeah. Once in a while, thankfully, that kind of all of a sudden pops up that I realize, wait a second, like why do I care about this stuff? And there's like something going on, like something spiritual in the background, and it's really fascinating because if you ever read that book like Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis, I read that years ago, and I really want to read it again because I think there's a lot of truth to it that I've experienced. But that's one of the things I think he, this demon is like writing his apprentice demon and giving him tips on how to lead people astray, basically, or tempt them and stuff. And I think that's one of the things they say is like, he talks about like those little things, like work at them like with these little tiny things and build upon those. And that's how you kind of start pulling someone away from, like, in their sense, they don't want someone to be involved with God. And so like, or relationships, destroying relationships, like hint at these little things, like push on these little things. And I think that's a lot of it. A lot of it is spiritual, because I don't think our enemy likes healthy marriages.
Probably not. You were just talking about this, and I'm trying to think of the name of a show that I watched.
Malcolm in the Middle?
No. It's about this guy. He's in seminary to become a priest, and he helps investigate like these demonic possessions, and so he's basically kind of like on this task force.
Sounds like a light happy show
for the church. No, it's not. And anyways, so yeah, this priest in training kind of works for the priest who is over these demonic possessions for the Catholic Church in his area. I can't find the show right here, and I can't remember the name of it. But anyways, so he hires I can't remember if she is a psychologist or therapist to kind of help with this, and then he's got one other guy that helps out with it. But there's like this nemesis figure, and he's portrayed as basically like a human manifestation of Satan, you know? And just like what you're talking about, he does very similar things. He uses people to chip away at relationships, and he himself will, so like with this therapist or psychologist, whatever she is, he quickly becomes her enemy because of some weird, crazy stuff that he does. And then he enters into a relationship with her mother because she's kind of vulnerable and lonely and looking for a relationship. And so, you know, by entering into this relationship with her, it obviously drives her totally bananas. And then he causes division. But one of the things I was thinking of, he used this young woman. So it's like that temptation in the wilderness type stuff, you know, like basically you worship me and I'll give you what you want. And so there's this young woman who wants to be like an online influencer, you know, and so she basically kind of does his work online by influencing young girls to do certain harmful things to themselves. And then she gets the notoriety that she's looking for. And the reason I bring that up is because I've been listening to a podcast that your brother recommended to me. It's called Theology in the Raw. And there's 6 episodes, and then a book. The book is called Embodied by Preston. I'll have to look it up. But it's about the trans movement, basically. And so yesterday I was listening. So there's actually a Joe Rogan episode. Can't remember where I shared it. I think I shared it on Facebook.
Yeah, I believe I saw that, yeah.
Did you see that? And he interviewed a journalist who's done some significant research into this movement, and that's interesting. So I would encourage you. Maybe we can look up some of these links and put them in our description. That's a interesting watch or listen, because she really just found some incredible stuff. But I was listening to one of I think it was the episode 4 on the Theology in the Raw podcast, where he's talking about the trans movement. And this young woman that had been in this movement for a couple years talks about specifically Tumblr and how this online community of Tumblr kind of engaged with her and drew her in, and she calls it brainwashed her. But essentially they glorify like self-harm stuff. And they encourage people to harm themselves, cut themselves, submit photos of what they do, and then they create from that self-harm, they'll create artwork out of it. So it kind of glorifies, the self-harm. And then there's just kind of this whole other thing with transitioning, and that's like a whole nother part of it. But it made me think of that show. It made me think of that show, and this character, his name is Leland, who kind of personifies Satan. And then obviously makes me think about, the battles that we face as humans. We perceive to be worldly human battles.
Right.
And sometimes I feel like we give Satan too much credit. Like it's like sometimes you just feel like, it's an easy way to write something off. Like, oh, the devil made me do it. This is just demonic influence in our world. Whatever, however we talk about it. But sometimes I think we don't give it enough credit. I think we're one way or the other. Some people just kind of give the devil all the credit all the time. Other people don't really acknowledge it. I'm probably in the camp that I really don't acknowledge it that much. I probably point to more human flaws and just emotional illnesses and just different things, that cause some of these situations. I tend to be somebody that doesn't give the devil much credit, but
or much blame.
There is
much
obviously
case, I guess.
yeah, but I think it is true. Obviously, if the Holy Spirit can work in this world, so can other spiritual forces too, in good and bad, right? So it's just an interesting thing to think about, the Lelands of this world, that are represent the evil spiritual forces impacting humans, to do things, and that's something that we don't really understand. We obviously can't see it. We don't understand it. But I do believe. I believe in a biblical worldview, so I believe that does take place, right? Even though I don't see it, I don't understand it. I may not be able to ever totally put my finger on it, but if I believe, that worldview, then that has to be part of the equation. So. But
it's very true. It's one of the many things I feel like in the Bible that, especially when Jesus speaks so clearly about certain things, where it's like, well, obviously that's true. I can't throw that out, but I've yet to maybe experience it in the real way that I experience some other things. That maybe you experience like someone with mental issues, or someone with anger issues, where you can see the cause or whatever. It's harder to explain or to blame things that you don't see physically. What I find it interesting though is that it goes back to, and maybe we had this conversation with your friend Bill. I can't remember if we got into that at all, but like how some people have that gift of perception with those kind of things. And I've met people like that before, where they can kind of sense, like, it's like a change of atmosphere, sort of, And that's really fascinating, where it's almost like someone, like for you, for example, I think you have a good palate and you're a good cook. A lot of that is also like a talent, right? And a gift. And it's like you have an ability maybe to taste something and kind of see if it tastes good. Obviously there's opinions and that kind of thing too, but it almost seems like that, like some people have like a ability just to like sense things, and I don't know why, God's given that to certain people and to others not, and if we can learn that, or if we can receive that from God, I think we can grow in that, and understanding and that kind of thing, but it's probably, I wonder how many people are like that but don't talk about it, because it's viewed, especially by certain groups or certain churches, would be viewed as kind of weird.
Little
because I think that's a very valuable thing. I think I know people very well who have that, but probably don't talk about it much. Or even, I have two really good friends of mine who have seen demons, seen like demonic presence in their room. And I never have, seen that. And maybe I've been in a room where there's been something like that, but I haven't. And why is that,
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think it's a bad thing that you don't. It seems like from the people that I've talked to, that do see that kind of stuff, typically, just in conversation, there's been some connection to where they used to dabble in it. So they may have dabbled in something a little bit demonic in their past, and it seems like that kind of creates a situation where that door for, I don't know if it's temptation, but that door is just a little more open in their life for that reason, and where I know that I haven't, I don't think you have either, have ever dabbled in that. I had a friend, it was really interesting. He said something to me one time that I think about fairly often. And he's a Christian today. But he was not a Christian for his early adult life, and kind of had just a lot of different things that he struggled with. But he said, I tried praying to God in some of those low moments of his life, and he never answered me. But when I prayed to Satan, he would answer me. And that's just a weird... so I'm somebody that I've never gone down that path, right? And he didn't... I mean, he wasn't like... It wasn't like organized religion, It was just basically, I've prayed to God. He didn't answer me, so I'm just gonna... His next rational, logical thing in his mind was just to pray to the opposite spiritual source, And so, and for whatever it was in that moment, it seemed like he did answer that prayer, And so he said, that's pretty crazy. That's pretty crazy to experience that. But because of that, it seems like that door is a little more open, in his life. And so he's experienced some weird stuff, probably because of that. So I have a hard time wrapping my mind around that kind of stuff. I talked to a man the other day who, asked, a little bit about what I did and who I was, and found out that I do some ministerial type work, and he immediately kind of took off on a path of, his own experience, as far as he was very well read, and liked to read older texts, kind of ancient type texts about religion and mysticism and all kinds of things, and he then went on to talk about the fact that he could actually go to different realities, and experience other realities and different things, and so there's that end of it too. Now, in my mind, he probably had some mental health issues that probably contributed to that in his life. I know they talk about certain types of drugs. Like I think LSD is one of the main. I think that's a psychedelic drug that people talk about having these experiences where they. That actually is an interesting thing, because people prior to taking some of these drugs will not have a belief in a higher power. And then they will take these drugs, and then through taking those drugs, they will come away from that experience having a belief in a higher power. I find that very interesting.
Yeah.
All of this just to say that it seems like there are some very real spiritual realities in our world, and I don't understand them. I don't understand them. Some of them I don't want to understand. I don't really want to experience them.
Right.
At least in the way that some people do. But I think this is a real part of our world. Other parts of the world, Seth, I think do experience these things in a more real way on a fairly regular basis. Mm-hmm. Has that been kind of your understanding as well?
Yes. I mean, yes and no. I mean, I think there's some probably, I remember hearing once, I can't remember who it was. They were talking about like, Innsbruck is a city I live in, right? And they're talking about there's like this location, this place in Innsbruck that was like well known for this kind of stuff, like really extremely demonic stuff going on, like big groups of people doing things together. And I was like, whoa, like I've never even heard about that. A lot of it's under your nose. I've heard countless stories of people from here that have either themselves dabbled in some things or experienced things, like kids they went to high school with here doing blood offerings to like their own to Satan. Young kids in school. Like we had young kids come to our youth center and be like, "There's these kids in school like playing this game where they're praying to Satan." And this little girl wasn't a Christian, and she was super like shook, from what she had seen from these kids. She was like 11. Things like that. There's some weird stuff, man, that goes on under our nose too. I feel like everywhere, but some cultures it's much more widely accepted and talked about as being a normality. It's just like, spirituality. Spiritual beings are like physical beings. It's just like a part of our daily existence. That's reality. And so I think I remember visiting a church once. My friend went to, he worked for this church, and so because I knew him, I sort of knew a little bit of the inner workings of the church and knew that they were kind of, what's the word, like whatever, they didn't really believe in like a lot of that spiritual stuff really going on.
Dispensational.
Yeah. And so I knew that right about this church. Mm-hmm. And the day I happened to be there, they had these missionaries from Africa there. And they shared about these incredible, crazy, like demonic things that they had experienced at this village that they were saying in Africa, and like, having experiences with demonic power, and then like, getting struck down with a plague basically, and not being able to move, and then like having people pray over them, and then just immediately being healed so they continue to their work and things like that. And then like everyone just being like so amazed by it, and the pastor like being so supportive, and be like, this is just incredible stuff that God's doing there with you guys. And it's just so funny because it was like, I was almost like, well, that stuff doesn't happen here, but yeah, it's cool if it happens for you guys, because I knew like the inner workings of this church, where my friend who worked there was told like, don't, you can't have these certain beliefs, but yet they're like supporting missionaries who are in a culture where that is just like a normal part of their daily ministry. And so it's interesting where I think sometimes we almost, in some of these, our Western culture, we almost want to like try as hard as possible to like cut that stuff out and pretend it doesn't exist, unless it comes from a faraway land where it's not going to affect us or something. So it's interesting you talk about that guy that you were talking about who said he like experienced different dimensions. I had this guy who we called stretchy pants, kind of, because he wore these like spandex pants. He had some issues. He came up by our youth center sometimes because we were in an area where there's a lot of homeless and people with drug issues and stuff. And he came in one time, I remember, and he was talking about how he has these experiences and just talking weird stuff. And he'd like look in the window and start talking and having a whole conversation, just looking at the window, not speaking to anyone. But then he told this kid who was with me, he's like, "Oh, I've seen you in your room before." And it was like really weird, obviously. Creepy. And then later this kid told me, after this guy was gone, because we were like, this guy should not be around. After this guy was gone, the kid told me, like, I've experienced weird stuff in my room, like demonic kind of stuff going on. And so that kind of blew me away. That was really a strange experience. This has kind of just turned into a storytelling thing, but
yeah, it's just the demonic storytelling podcast
and
session. So
I guess the point of that is it encourages me, I guess. What I want to say to kind of, I guess, wrap this up is it encourages me that I think God uses people, like you said, who maybe opened those doors in their past. And so now, because of that, now maybe they're with Christ, but because of those experiences in their past, they have like this, they might have experiences that we won't have. But God's using them to probably help others and to just like kind of work maybe a little bit more in that spiritual realm. In the same way where I would see like he could use me because I, struggled with pornography for a lot of years, when I was younger, that I can like, I know what that's like. I know the things that entails, or it could help someone who was an alcoholic or someone who struggled with hate or whatever, like, it's just cool, I guess, how big God is. And no matter the stuff we've opened ourselves up to, and it doesn't make us worse or better, because like once we're in this family, then it's like we're all in the same boat and we're trying to we have the same goal, and God's going to use the things that we've struggled with to further his kingdom.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's like another part of this conversation is the difficult things in our life God uses to create empathy towards other people that struggle with that same thing. I just told a friend about this book. One of the podcasts that I don't mention often enough, but a lot of, just helping me through kind of my own journey and just thinking through different biblical aspects that we kind of wrestle with is the Bible Project. That's a great podcast to listen to. They've got videos, obviously. That's kind of their main thing, but I've really enjoyed their podcast because they just kind of help me think through different concepts and different even words. They'll do like a word study sometimes, which is just really helpful. But one of the books that Tim Mackey recommended is called The Chosen by Chaim Potok, who was a Jewish rabbi. And it's a great read. And basically, the book is about difficulties in life creating empathy for other people. And so how these difficult experiences that we have, or in this case of the book, it was like an intentional difficulty that the father created for his son in order for his son to be empathetic as an adult. And this stemmed from an experience that his father had watched take place in his brother's life. And, so yeah, people struggle with why do bad things happen? Why do we experience these difficulties? Another book that I read called The Mind of Christ relates a story about these two women that were raped by a group of men. And one of them was a Catholic nun, and she was consoling the other girl that was raped, and I think the other girl was a missionary of some kind. And the nun tells this missionary, God used our bodies tonight so somebody else didn't have to experience what we did.
Wow.
And so there's just kind of some otherworldly thinking out there that is hard for most of us to understand. I can't understand what that nun told that young girl, to put myself in that position and to process it the way she was processing it.
Right.
That doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense just from a purely human perspective. I mean, it does in one way, but as a parent, for instance, we don't want our children to experience bad things. We want to protect our children from bad things. Yet, the bad things many times are what give our children the tools they need down the road to be successful as adults, And as parents, we try to protect them from the bad things. And I can even say in my own family, I have seen my parents and how they tried protecting my sister and I from some bad things that have impacted us in a negative way as adults. Had they just let happen what happened, what probably needed to happen, it would have probably, created some growth in areas that we did not experience because we were protected from it, And so there's just this weird thing going on, kind of just like from this human perspective. There's like a godly perspective. He understands how we're wired. He understands what we need to have take place in our lives in order to really connect to him better and be able, through that connection to him, then be able to connect back to the world in a godly kind of kingdom way, that without these experiences we just can't do, And Colin Cowherd, I love listening to Colin Cowherd. He calls, he says, these people grow up in difficult circumstances. He was just talking about it this week or last week. He was comparing them to like trust fund kids.
Athletes?
Trust fund kid. No, just people in general.
Okay. Yeah.
But he was just saying, like trust fund kids rarely grow up to do anything significant with their lives because they've been given everything since they were born. And he said most CEOs of Fortune 500 companies came from middle class or lower middle class or maybe even somewhat impoverished backgrounds because they know how to fight, they know how to scrap, they understand how to get ahead in the world, where the trust fund kids have just always had everything given to them. They've never experienced adversity like these other people have. So I think, we can look at just the idea of adversity in our human experience as being significant and important. If we don't experience adversity, then we don't. It triggers growth that needs to take place, and so I think that's an interesting thing, because a lot of people within the Christian faith ask, why do bad things still happen to me after I follow God?
Right.
And I think the short answer is because they need to. They need to happen. That bad stuff kind of it's part of the growth process. And, and then there's the other aspect that we were talking about with the spiritual side of it, that seems to be behind the scenes working. There's the story of Job. That's a hard one for a lot of people to get their mind around.
Yeah. Understandable. It's hard for me to get my mind around.
Yeah. Are we done talking? You look like you're done. You're yawning. You look fatigued.
Man, we went through the ringer.
We talked about a lot of stuff today. Yeah, we talked about, and most of what we talked about never got recorded. We were trying to figure out what we wanted to talk about, and we as usual went down some crazy path that we didn't really anticipate. A lot of what we talked about we didn't really discuss beforehand, but
that's life. Or that's our life. I guess that's life. Our life.
That's our life. That's our life. So, but anyways, well, I enjoyed talking with you, man. Thank you. You spent time praying for me a little bit before we started, just because of an experience that I'm going through right now. So I appreciate that.
Of course, man.
So, yeah. But, anyways, well, God's blessings in your direction towards Innsbruck. Tell your family hello and that we love them. And thank you to all those people that listen today. Are we ever? We've never had like a lot of feedback. We do have some people listening to this podcast, Seth. But how do you think we should encourage them to interact with us? Because we've never got like an email or really any. Our Twitter account is very pathetic. That's just a very
honestly
maybe
email
smoke signals.
There's also on any of the platforms, so whether it's like YouTube or iTunes or whatever, usually there's like a place where people can comment and write things if they want to. Mm-hmm. It is interesting. I mean, some people I know, right, that listen to this, and I hear different comments and questions or whatever. Other people I have no idea. I mean, I probably don't necessarily know the majority of people. So if anybody has any comments and questions or topics they'd like to throw our way, do it, whether it's email or just on one of the platforms, whatever platform you use, commenting directly to that.
Yeah. I would be interested, to hear about other significant experiences with like this spiritual world,
Right.
Because like the missionaries that you were mentioning, a lot of times like in Africa, Haiti, I've known a lot of people that have gone to Haiti.
Yeah, me too.
And had some really kind of wild, experiences. So I guess if you're listening, if you happen to be listening and want to share some experience that we could maybe talk about down the road, that'd be kind of interesting. So anyways, we're probably going to hear another Klemens song today, right? What was the name of the one? We'll replay the one you did last time. Which one is that?
I believe it's called I've Been Drowned.
I've Been Drowned. Yeah. Yeah, so we'll replay that for everybody. You can check out Klemens.
Yes. Do it.
I enjoy his music. The one song or the two songs that I really enjoy that we don't. Maybe ask him if we could play those sometime. But Dancing Sid and the Meat and Cheese song, I really love those two songs. And there's something about Klemens that is just a lot of fun. You know, he's kind of quirky, kind of fun, and for me, kind of relatable. You know, I can just kind of relate to some of the stuff that he writes about. And so, anyways, but
cool, man.
All right, brother.
Heyo, thanks for checking in again. We appreciate the listen. Once again, we got our buddy Klemens with some music here at the end for you. Also sprinkled some in throughout the episode. Another thing to remind you all, you can also find us at Instagram, we.will.journey.
I've been drowned and sank to the ground. The box pulls me down while beams turn greener. I've been drowned, I'm trying to shout, but no one hears the sound of screaming when you've been drowned. One box fades into the brackish fog. My toes land on muddy fleas next to rotten logs. It's hard to move, I feel like I'm locked in a cotton cage. The swamps all up by silent like a grave. Blurry figures sneaking through the creeper's wood. Impromptu adoption is far too well understood. Dull acceptance vital to this underwater culture, while the spikes cycling us like vultures. I've been drowned.